Hey friend, I hope you know this is Pat Boone, and you and I are enjoying TV Confidential with my buddy Ed.
Ed Robertson welcoming you back to TV Confidential radio talk show about television. Always happy to welcome back our friend James Rosen. James Rosen, actor, author, and our resident expert on the cultural history of the city of Philadelphia. The NBA season is in full swing as we record this conversation with Jim, with the playoffs not far behind. With that in mind, we thought we'd talk to Jim about a documentary that he wrote and produced a few years back that not only takes a deep dive into the history of one of the NBA's most storied franchises, the Philadelphia Warriors, now the Golden State Warriors, but also traces the rise of professional basketball in general in the city of brotherly love, including a look at the Philadelphia Spas, the first professional basketball team in Philadelphia, and a look at the life and legacy of Eddie Gottlieb. Eddie Gottlieb, the man who not only owned and operated the Philadelphia Spas, but one of the founders of the NBA and the original owner and the original coach of the Philadelphia Warriors franchise. The documentary is called Philly Hoops. It is available on DVD. We'll tell you where in just a second. Jim Rosen, welcome back to our program.
Oh, thank you for having me.
We were talking about this a little bit before we started recording. It's this, you making this documentary is sort of a natural progression because you also did a documentary on the history of the Philadelphia A's. Before they played in Sacramento and Oakland, in Kansas City, the A's were born in the city in Philadelphia for many, many years. And you did a documentary on the Philadelphia A's, and so it makes a lot of sense that you did this documentary on the history of the Warriors and basketball in Philadelphia.
Yeah, no one had done anything on the A's, a lot on the Phillies, but the A's were here 54 years, so I came out with a documentary on that history, the Philadelphia Athletics, 1901 to 1954, and it encompassed all, the history of the team and Connie Mack, who was a legendary manager, and they were a great team and had great players, so yeah, it was the right thing to do. And the same thing with the Warriors, who are now, and that's your team now.
It is my team. I mean, even though I'm based in L.A., I still follow the Warriors. Although the Warriors, as we have this conversation, I think their season is basically over. But you never, as they say, if they make the playoffs, you never know once you're in the tournament, anything can happen. So,
that's true.
But
true.
Yeah, but they've been slowed by some major injuries. But that is part of the game. That is part of the game. So, I have a few takeaways from watching Philly Hoops. Very, very well made. Very, very well made. It is available. On DVD through Amazon.com. You can also find it at a website called MovieZyng.com. That's MovieZyng.com. And this relates to the Philadelphia Spas in particular, although it also relates to the Warriors in their early years as well. But it was interesting to learn how unifying the game of basketball was to many families in Philadelphia in the early 20th century, particularly families in the Jewish communities.
Oh, yes. It was a big thing in the Jewish community because in South Philadelphia in particular, you had all these families living on a block and all these kids, and, they were restless and wanted to run around. And just the first thing kids were putting up peach baskets in the alleyways and throwing up the ball. And ultimately, as the game developed, it gave them an identity, and it gave them, for many, a way out of poverty. That it continued throughout the 1930s and into the 40s, and as we get into this, you'll see in the mid to late 1930s there was a lot of discrimination, anti-Semitism, and racial intolerance for the Afro-American people and for the Jewish people. There was a Nazi movement here in Philadelphia and New York, and it was interesting times, but it was always a vehicle for the people that were poor and children of Jewish immigrants to make something of themselves and have a purpose in the future.
One of those people who found a purpose through the game of basketball in Philadelphia in the early 20th century is Eddie Gottlieb. And Eddie Gottlieb, as we said in our open, is a man whose imprint on the game of professional basketball is still very evident today.
Oh, yeah, he's great. There was a book written about him about 5 or 6 years ago called The Mogul, and Eddie Gottlieb, who was nicknamed Gotti, was quite a character. He was a student of basketball at South Philadelphia High School, and he helped create the team that ultimately was sponsored by a social club called the South Philadelphia Hebrew Association. And he and two other players, Huey Black and Harry Passon, were the driving force behind the spas and developing into a professional team. And he was a very colorful personality, on and off the court. He was very demanding of his players. He hated to lose, Well, Jerry Rulo, who was a guard with the Philadelphia Warriors in the early years, said, Eddie, if we lost the game, he said Eddie would make sure if we thought we were going to lose or we were playing a tough team, he would give us our spending money before the game, because if we lost afterward, he didn't want to talk to anybody. Another time, George Dempsey, who played in the 50s, he told me a story about this player that the Warriors had, Joe Grabowski, who was not a shooter. He was a big power forward, and they were playing Boston or New York, and they were winning, and then it became very close. And in the waning moments of the game, he took a shot from California, and it didn't even reach the basket, and they got the rebound and came back, and they beat the Warriors by 2 points. And afterward, in the locker room, he said Eddie Gottlieb went nuts. He said this and that. He used a few cuss words. He even invented a few, and he really raked them over the coals. And Grabowski for taking that shot. He loved to win. He loved to win, and he was a very wise man, and he loved players that played defense, and he loved players that could put the ball in the basket. And, he had his own defense out. He was instrumental in having it outlawed because he thought it slowed down the game and made it boring. And, ultimately, I think it was 1954, they invented the 24-second clock, because prior to that, a team could be winning, and they got the ball with 3 or 4 minutes left. They could hold on to the ball and win the game, and the opposing team that might have had a chance to win had no chance at all.
Yeah, so the interesting thing about Gottlieb is he was very much a stickler for the fundamentals, at least, in that era of professional basketball. And so if you took a shot from the top, half court,
yeah.
That was a low percentage shot, and you didn't make it, he'd let you know about it, because that was that went against the fundamentals. But and this speaks to why he instituted the 24-second clock, is because while he wanted to win and he wanted his players to play, according to the fundamentals, he also knew that this was a spectator sport, and if you wanted to keep fans in the seats, or if you wanted to keep fans coming to the games, you got to give them something fun and exciting to watch, and there is nothing more boring than watching 5 guys play keep away in the last 3 minutes of a game, just because they could back in that era.
Oh, yeah, definitely. So that was a magic year, because up to that point, there was no 24-second rule. And then Denny Biasone, who was the owner of the Syracuse Nationals, he came up with the formula for the 24-second rule, and he figured out that each team averaged about 60 shots per game. So you multiply that by 2 teams, that gives you 120 shots, okay? Then you divide that into the total amount of seconds in a 48-minute game, which was, I think, about 2,880, I think, exactly. And then you divide that by the 120, and you get 24. It's tight as a knot, as my cousin said in Shalom Aleichem, right?
There you go.
Tight as a knot, tight as a knot.
There you go. That cousin being none other than the great Nehemiah Persov. George Dempsey is one of the people that Jim Rosen talked to for his documentary Philly Hoops, as is Paul Orozin, Tom Gola, many, many others, plus the story of such legendary Philadelphia players as Wilt Chamberlain. Philly Hoops available on DVD through Amazon.com and Movie Zing, Movie Z-Y-N-G, MovieZing.com. Jim?
I grew up with those players, Tom Gola and Paul Orozin. They were Hall of Fame players. They were from Villanova and LaSalle. They were just terrific people, and they embraced me when I did the documentary, and you can see their contribution was just terrific, and he was just a lovable guy, Orozin, and Wilt Chamberlain really did something that he never did for anyone. He really went out on the limb to make Paul's granddaughter, who was ill, make the last part of her life just a very enjoyable experience. They became very good friends, and he at an NBA event he took her around. He wheeled her around. She was in a wheelchair and got everybody's autograph, even Bill Russell, who didn't give autographs. And he was a terrific man, and Tom Gola. They were both legendary players in Philadelphia. Yeah. And they really enriched my documentary, you know.
Yeah, that documentary being Philly Hoops, the Spas, and the Warriors, the birth of pro basketball in the city of Philadelphia, available wherever DVDs are sold, Amazon.com, MovieZing.com, MovieZyng.com, and wherever else DVDs are available.
Stay with us, folks. We'll be right back.
This portion of TV Confidential is brought to us by our friends at Front Porch Realty, the community of realtors in the Northern Bay area of California that is committed to finding the solution that is best for their clients. Whether you're a first-time home buyer or looking to sell or lease your property in Northern California, call Karen Strain at 415-886-7411 or visit frontporchrealtygroup.com for more information on how they can help you.
Ed Robertson, thanking you for listening to the TV Confidential podcast. If you like what you hear, please hit the subscribe button so that you won't miss our next episode.
This is John Klugman, and you're listening to TV Confidential.
We're going to jump around. I want to talk a little bit about the Spas because that was... I knew a little bit about the backstory of the Philadelphia Warriors, but I did not know much about the Philadelphia Spas. But while you mentioned Wilt Chamberlain, it's interesting. Everyone thinks of Wilt as because he was tall and because he was a high scorer, and they tend to think of him for his offensive greatness, but he really was a well-rounded player. His nemesis, you might say, was Bill Russell. And while Wilt matched up one-on-one very well with Russell, he didn't have the same supporting cast that Russell did, and that was the difference between the Warriors. That was often the difference between the Warriors and the Celtics in the late 50s, early 1960s.
Exactly, you hit the nail right on the head. Boston had Bob Cousy, Bill Sharman, Bill Russell, Frank Ramsey. They had Tommy Heinsohn. A lot of those players were Hall of Famers. And then behind the guards, Cousy and Sherman, they had Casey Jones and Sam Jones. Behind Heinsohn, they had Satch Sanders. They had a lot of great players, maybe 10 deep. The Warriors had Guy Rogers, who was a definitive point guard. He was probably the first guy that initiated the no-look pass from Temple University. He was their point guard, Tom Gola at the shooting guard, and Gola was big, was 6'6". Paul Ireson at the small forward. At the power forward, they had Woody Salisbury, who was Rookie of the Year, and then he was traded, and they had Andy Johnson, and then they had Wilt in the middle. And beside that, that was it. In 61, Al Attles came from North Carolina A&T, I believe, and he was the third guard in the rotation. But outside of that, they had really 6-7 players to the Celtics 10. So that was a problem, you know, and Wilt, as you say, was known for his great strength. He also had a great ability to withstand pain because he was injured a couple times, but he kept quite on. But he made the NBA memorable. You know, the first year he played in 1959, I got to tell you how they got him. There was a rule in the NBA, this is interesting, in 1959, it didn't last very long. It was called the territorial draft pick, and you had to apply for it. And if you were granted the territorial draft pick, you lost your first round pick. Well, Wilt, growing up in Philadelphia, going to Overbrook High School, then went to Kansas, was playing with the Globetrotters, and Eddie Gottlieb went out and got permission to pick him as the draft pick. So he came to the team in 1959. They had won the championship in 1956 behind Gola and Arizin and Neil Johnston, who was also a Hall of Fame center. He had that great sweeping hook shot, you know. I guess a little reminiscent of Kareem Abdul-Jabbar's skyhook. Mm-hmm. And then they languished for 2 years because Gola went into the service, and Paul Arizin was injured, and Neil Johnson was also injured. They were 37 and 35. They played 72 games then. Well, they drafted Wilt, and all of a sudden, they were a new team. He scored 37, he averaged about 37 and a half points per game, and 27 rebounds per game, and he was named the league's most valuable player and player of the year. So a team with Arizin, Gola, Guy Rogers, and Woody Salisbury, they won 49 games and lost 26. They were second behind the Boston Celtics, who had that lineup I told you about, and they were 1-1. They were in the third game, and what happened is when they were at the foul line, Wilt would have the inside position. Tommy Heinsohn, who was a big power forward, he would be standing next to Wilt, right, mm-hmm. when the shot went up, and Heinsohn would step in front of Wilt to prevent him from running down the court, and Bill Russell would fast break and get the basket. Mm. Well, they kept doing it to him, and finally Wilt had enough. So he got into a fight with Heinsohn, and he threw a punch, and he broke his wrist. And then Celtics beat the Warriors 2 games in a row, but then even without Wilt, they went to the Boston Garden, and they slaughtered the Celtics in the next game. So now it's 3-2. They go to the 6th game of the season, and it's neck and neck. It's tie score without Wilt now. And the final seconds, one of the Boston players takes a shot and misses, and Heinsohn is there and tips it in, and they win the game by 2 points, and the Warriors are out of the playoffs. But they were now a different team, you know. The next season, they did not fare well. They were eliminated by the Syracuse Nationals in the 5-game series. What happened at that time, you had the 4 teams. You had the Warriors, the Knicks, the Celtics, and the Syracuse Nats. And the second and third team would play a 5-game playoff and then play the winner of the division for the conference title. Then they would play the West for the championship in the NBA. Well, they lost to the Celtics, and Neil Johnston was fired. The only addition that season was they picked up Al Attles from, I think, North Carolina A&T, became the third guard. But still, they only had like 6 guys with Al Attles coming off the bench, right, versus 10. So you go into the final year of the Warriors in Philadelphia. Johnston is fired because he and Wilt didn't get along. He wanted Wilt to play like he did. He wanted to remake Wilt in his own image, and Wilt didn't want any of that.
And we'll pick up that thread on the other side of the break. Jim Rosen is with us. Jim Rosen, writer and producer of Philly Hoops, an insightful documentary on the birth and rise of professional basketball in Philadelphia, and a look at the early years of the Philadelphia Warriors, the NBA franchise now known as the Golden State Warriors. We'll take a quick time out, then we'll continue our conversation with Jim. We come back here on TV Confidential.
Now you can fly anywhere in the world and pay discount prices on your airline tickets. Book a flight today to London, Paris, Madrid, or anywhere else you want to go. And pay a lot less guaranteed. Call the International Travel Department right now at Low Cost Airlines.
800-222-0511. 800-222-0511. Again, that's 800-222-0511.